November 17th, the clock's wrong. Is it right? What's wrong? Me, my watch. Oh, golly. Catching up with the world, sorry. So I'd like to convene the regular meeting I'm calling to order and Pledge of Allegiance, and I have two wonderful ladies who are going to say the pledge for us, Alyssa and Allison and Jessica. That's how bad my memory.
You ready? One.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, two. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I'm calling, we've already had our pledge. I'm calling the meeting to order. Note that no one in the chambers can be logged into a Zoom meeting from here because it sort of messes up our Zoom operation. And also note that I am calling a special meeting this evening. I'm opening the meeting as well as a special meeting of this same date to order concurrently with the regular meeting, and that the one item of business, which is a consent, will be acted upon with the regular consent items. We already have had our Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you so much. May I have roll call, please?
Vice Mayor Dean,
Present.
Councilmember Barnett,
Here.
Councilmember Felder,
Here.
Mayor Agramonte.
Here?
Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, I'm asking for any public participation using Zoom. I think you know you're in the Zoom process, and you're actually here to comment when we call on you. Also, there's no report from a closed session because we haven't had one. And at this point, I'd like approval of the agenda, please.
I approve that agenda.
I second.
Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Dean,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnett,
Aye.
Councilmember Felder, Mayor Agramonte.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Number one, regular calendar election. And we are here for a very special, momentous occasion. Adopt a resolution reciting the facts of the general municipal election held on November 2nd, 2021, declaring the result of such other matters as required by law, and thereby determining that Sandra Lowe has been elected to the office of the City Council of the City of Sonoma. And now I'll call on the City Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. This evening, we're bringing this resolution for you to declare the results of the special election that was held on November 2nd here in the city. The county did provide the certification of that election showing that Sandra Lowe was a successful candidate with 59.88% of the votes. So she will be elected. She's being elected to the city council member seat of Amy Harrington that is vacant. So tonight, by this, we'll be certifying those results, and then we'll proceed with her oath of office.
Do we have to vote on yes, we do. And
Yeah, you'll have to go through the normal process.
okay, well, I'll turn this over to the public now. All right, so we have people here and we also have people in Zoom. But I wanted to remind you, if you are working on your device and working on Zoom, it'll ruin the system. So please turn it off. Thank you. So public comments?
Mayor Agramonte, council members, staff, I wish to announce that I'm preparing a letter to the city manager to become the
Ken,
next.
Ken, this isn't the general public comment. That comes next.
Oh, I think he wants
What
to run
comment
for
is this?
all day.
This is just public comment on the resolution certifying Sandra Lowe as council.
My apologies.
No worries.
Anyone else want to come to the podium to comment on this? If not, then I'll close the public comments and bring it back to our city clerk.
I move that we adopt a resolution determining Sandra Lowe has been elected to the office of the City Council of the City of Sonoma.
I second.
May I have a vote, please? Count.
Vice Mayor Dean,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnett,
Aye.
Councilmember Felder,
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously. This is where we will perform the oath. So if Sandra would like to step forward.
Okay.
So please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Sandra Lowe, council member,
I, Sandra Lowe, council member,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
the duties upon which I'm about to enter. Thank you. If you can sign these two copies for me, my Mary Mayor. Oops. Trey.
So here I have public comments as well, so we'll open it up to public if you have something you'd like to share with us regarding what we've just done.
I thought it was
Oh, okay,
open time
regular. Okay,
comments and
regular.
things, not on the
Anything you
agenda.
would like to speak about. Thank you. I think Ken can come up now, right? You can come up, Ken.
I think I'd be used to this by now. Okay. Mayor Agramonte, council, staff, I wish to announce that I am preparing a letter to be submitted to the city manager for the alcalde position. I have participated in a broad spectrum of voluntary community service to the Sonoma Valley. I have served in a leadership role for nonprofits. I have spearheaded multiple community serving projects without compensation. I am well known for consistent behind-the-scenes good deeds. I adhere to a high standard of moral and ethical values. I have been a resident of Sonoma Valley since 1974. I served on the city council for 16 years, proudly. I want to thank you, and God bless us all.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Anyone else would like to speak?
Josette Brose-Eicher, 1110 Loma Court. First, let me say welcome, Sandra. Dave is not here tonight. He is at the MAC SVCAC meeting on SDC. I am sure all of you have been reading and hearing about the 3 plans the county has put forward for SDC. And I am sure you are all also aware of the community's dissatisfaction with these plans. Many of us have been writing to the county, and over 200 of us attended the Zoom workshop on Saturday. As you represent the city of Sonoma, I would urge all of you to please take a careful look at where we are and where we are going with SDC. We are all in this together. The Springs, the city of Sonoma, Glen Ellen, Kenwood. This will impact all of us and determine what our valley is forever. Critical environmental and housing considerations are absent from these plans. In all of this, I think the county has fallen short of engaging with the community. The Sonoma Land Trust, Sonoma Ecology Center, Glen Ellen Forum, Eldridge for All have all taken up the slack, and I thank them all for raising community awareness. And here is one that is harder and not so clear. Each day we find out another business or property has been purchased by the Matsons. In the Springs, we see properties they have purchased being neglected, and we keep hearing questionable reasons from the Matson representatives as to why this is. I was told by a Matson rep that he wanted to change my perception of his company. I believe actions speak louder than words. One does not work to change perception, one acts, and one does something in the realm of reality. It seems our communities, both the city of Sonoma and the Springs, are powerless. At some point, the reality of having one property owner control our business and employment is not healthy. How do we address reality, and how do we stop being a perception management experiment? Thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Anyone else like to get up and speak? Seeing none, do we have anyone from Zoom, in the Zoom audience that would like to speak?
No one has raised their hand, Madam Mayor.
All right, thank you so much. No written or anything. All right, thank you. Well, excuse dedications, and but I'll go last. I think, Mr. Barnett, if you'd like to go ahead.
Well, yeah, I'd just like to, on behalf of the council, invite our fire chief up to give our first meeting dedication.
Oh, good.
Thank you very much, Mayor, Council. Congratulations, Sandra. Look forward to working with you. It's my honor tonight to, and thank you for allowing me this honor, to dedicate tonight's meeting in part to Eric Thomas Paget. After a 22-month battle with pancreatic cancer, Eric passed away peacefully, surrounded by his family on November 3rd, 21, at his home here in Sonoma. Eric grew up in the Sonoma Valley and graduated from Sonoma Valley High School in 2001. During high school, Eric was an integral part of the FFA, band, and cheerleading programs. Soon after high school, Eric found his true passion of helping and serving others when in 2003 he became a volunteer firefighter in what is now the Sonoma Valley Fire District. He proudly served our community and made many lifelong friends throughout his 18 years with us serving. Eric also continued his service, obviously something that was deep and important to him, as he continued to work as a 911 dispatcher for the CHP, a firefighter at the Eldridge Fire Department in SDC, and as a public safety officer for the Yountville Veterans Home. Eric was a member of the Native Sons of the Golden West, president of the Sonoma Valley Girls Softball Association, and volunteered his time in even another way as both an EMT and an umpire for local sports. In his free time, Eric enjoyed camping with his family, reading, watching his kids play in their extracurricular activities. He was ever present at his kids' elementary school, St. Francis Solano, where he could be found working the lunch line, organizing the library, or volunteering for field trips and fundraisers. He never let cancer stop him from showing up and supporting his kids or his community. Eric is survived by his loving wife, Jessica, and his 4 children, Shelby, Travis, Jaden, and Allison. Eric also leaves behind many other family members, close friends, and his Sonoma Valley Fire, CHP, and softball families. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Aker. I would also like to dedicate this meeting to Rachel Cicchetti. Rachel was a longtime Sonoman who passed away on November 4th. She was 64. She was born and raised in Oakland, and then she went on to Santa Clara University, where she majored in English, and on a study abroad program, she fell in love with a fellow Santa Clara student, Roy Cicchetti, and married him in 1981. Shortly thereafter, they moved to Sonoma, and their family became complete with the arrival of their daughter, Allie. Rachel was friendly, energetic, and gracious. She was a devoted and caring friend, and she was happiest being a wife, mother, and nana. She's survived by her husband, Roy, daughter, Allie, grandsons, Nikolai and Alexander, father, Richard, sister, Lindsay, and sister-in-law, Nancy. And she also leaves behind many nephews and nieces and family in Sonoma who will always remember and miss her.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Barnett. I would like to dedicate this evening to Leonard F. Duggan, Jr. Leonard Duggan passed away at his home in the Philippines October 7th, 2021, his wife Emily at his side. Born in San Francisco to Leonard F. and Mary J. Duffy Duggan on January 17, 1940, 7 minutes before his twin sister Marilyn, to which they both like to joke it was the only fight he ever won. Besides his loving wife, Emily Len, he is survived by loving father Patrick Russell Duggan, his wife Sherry, Timothy Michael Duggan, Robert O'Shaughnessy, and his wife Marla James D. Deshone, loving grandfather Peyton Duggan, Calvin and Alexandra Deshone, dear brother of Marilyn Duggan Caselli, who precedes him in death, Susan Duggan, Letitia Duggan Tartarian, and her husband Ed and Edward her husband Ed, Richard Duggan, and his wife Stephanie. I would also like to dedicate this evening to Joaquin Florencio Reyes, 17, of Sonoma, who passed away tragically November 1st. Joaquin was born on December 24th, 2003, to Cara Olnes Reyes and Ricardo Reyes in Sonoma. He was a Sonoma boy. He attended Flowery Elementary, Adele Harrison Middle School, and was recently in his senior year at Sonoma Valley High School. He was described by those who knew him as someone who is highly intelligent, kind, respectful, funny, tall, inquisitive, attractive, athletic, genuine, quick-witted, and always loved an impassioned debate. He was a straight A student, making the superintendent's honor roll. I would like to dedicate this evening, along with others, to Joaquin Florencio Reyes, 17, of Sonoma. Thank you. And I think we're moving on to presentations.
I do have.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yeah. I would like to dedicate our meeting to Harry Andy Andrews. Harry Andy Andrews, a Sonoma resident since 1985, died unexpectedly on October 17, 2021, at the age of 84. Andy is survived by his wife, Juliet Andrews, née Brown, his children, Scott Angela Andrews, Donna Morosi, Cindy Matt Jones, Michelle Greg Broadbent, grandchildren, Paul Wilson, Michael Broadbent, Juliana Broadbent, Shanna Carlos Pars, Desiree Jones, and Amanda Andrews. Great-grandchildren, Isaiah Paza, Olivia Paz, and Sophia Villigante, preceded by his grandson, Steve Wilson. Andy was born in Missouri on October 13, 1937, to John and Ellen May Andrews. They moved to California in 1940. He joined Navy as a young man. His father was a commander, sworn Andy into service. After his military service, he lived in San Francisco, where he worked as mechanic in a service station. He moved on to owning a series service stations, moving to Marin County in 1972. In the late 1970s, Andy owned, operated Sonoma Pool Service and Supplier, a service for pools and hot tubs. After selling his pool business, he semi-retired and worked for his son, Scott, at Pacific Ring Auto Repair as a shop bookkeeper. Andy, a very active man. He was a pilot, private pilot, and took the local children out in his plane, certifying them as a junior eagle. He loved to water ski, snow ski, was a certified scuba diver. He and his wife, Juliet, loved to travel and had many adventures together with their children and friends. He will be greatly missed by all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Ding. And now we're moving on to presentations. So I see our Finance Director.
We can do that now. She just wanted to introduce our newest
Oh, that's
employee.
right. May I say her name?
Yes, you may.
Okay, thank you. We have a new Deputy Finance Director, Liz Garcia, Deputy Finance Director. Welcome.
So good evening, Mayor Agramonte and Council, and welcome, Councilmember Lowe. Good to have you. So I just wanted to introduce Liz Garcia, who started with the City of Sonoma on November 1st as a new Deputy Finance Director. And Liz comes to us with a wealth of experience. Most recently, she was the finance manager for the City of Healdsburg, where she worked for 6 years. And during her tenure in Healdsburg, she implemented a new accounting system. Yay, has experience. Was responsible for the annual audits and assisted in the preparation of the biannual budgets. Prior to working for the City of Healdsburg, Liz was a manager for Miller and Associates, a CPA firm in Santa Rosa. Liz also has a master's degree in business administration and is a certified public accountant. So we're very excited to have Liz on the finance team. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. And now we will have a presentation from Travis Wagner. I'm very looking forward to this, Travis, because it's something so special.
Madam Mayor and honorable members of the City Council, community volunteers are a crucial part of helping make Sonoma a wonderful place to live, work, play, and visit. The Sonoma Ecology Center's Earthlings is a local volunteer group of about 20 who range in age from 2 to 70 years old. They have a passion and commitment to improve Sonoma's environment and support climate action. They do not just discuss what needs to be done, they act. A special note is their recent assistance in supporting the city's effort to implement the state's mandatory organics recycling law, SB 1383, which is designed to reduce the landfilling of organic materials, the generation of methane, and a powerful greenhouse gas. This summer, the Earthlings worked with the city's sustainability coordinator to write and produce informational videos to help teach the community how to properly sort organic and recyclable materials. They also recorded public service announcements for KSVY radio on proper sorting and recycling. All these videos and PSAs are posted on the city's Sort It Sonoma website, so please be sure to check it out and see their efforts. And now, the Earthlings are distributing upon request only signs and table tents to local restaurants and grocery stores in support of the city's new disposable food serviceware ordinance that just went into effect last month. These signs and tents are intended to educate customers and businesses on the new requirement to provide condiment packets, straws, cup lids, chopsticks, and single-use napkins only when a customer requests them. Because these products are not recycled, if we can decrease the amount generated, we can help reduce environmental impacts. Meeting with businesses face-to-face to help explain why, rather than just what, is crucial to successful implementation. This could not have been done without the Earthlings. We all should thank the Earthlings for making a difference in helping make Sonoma a better place to live, work, play, and visit. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And a special moment, sad for me, with Deputy Lucchetti. I'd like to introduce you to everyone here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this is Deputy Lucchetti, someone who's wonderful. I mean, always there when we need you. Thank you so much. Deputy Lucchetti has been a law enforcement officer for 26 years. He started his career as a peace officer in 1995 and with the South Lake Tahoe Police Department. In 1998, he was hired as a police officer by the city of Sonoma and worked for the Sonoma Police Department until the sheriff's office took over police services for the city of Sonoma in 2004. In July of 2004, Steve was hired by the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office and was assigned to the Sonoma Police Department in August of 2004 and has been here ever since. Steve has been an exemplary employee and a role model for other experienced deputies. He has dedicated his law enforcement career to the city of Sonoma for the past 23 years. Steve grew up in Sonoma, and it's why he enjoys serving his community. Steve has been instrumental in helping our homeless, in which he has worked with nonprofit organizations such as SOS to assist with shelter, food, or other services. Steve has been a humble servant to this community, and we are sad but also happy to see him go and enjoy retirement. We are proud of him, and we wish him the very best in his future endeavors. I'd like to ask our chief, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much. I really appreciate
I'm going to
it.
miss you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Really appreciate
Chief
it.
Rodriguez?
Thank you,
Don't
Madam
leave.
Mayor and City Council members. Thank you for having us here today. Before I get started, I just want to say to the Pageant family, our condolences to them. And also, since we missed last week, to our veterans that are here and the veterans that are gone and the veterans that are continuing to serve, thank them for their service. Steve, what can I say about Steve? I mean, I think you said it all. Every time we need Steve, he's a phone call away. He shows up. If we need somebody to come in right away, he's here right away. He's reached out to our community and to people here, our kids, to everybody. I mean, he's always here. He's born and raised here. He went to school here. Everybody knows. We lovingly call him the mayor of Sonoma, no disrespect. But every time we're with Steve, everybody says hi to Steve. So And I also have one of our special deputy, junior deputies who wants to say a couple words. Jack Morton, stand up. I thought you had a note that you wanted to say something, but he's our junior deputy. He rides with Steve every once in a while. He comes to our sub and goes on ride-alongs with Steve's. I think you might have something to say here.
Good evening. I just want to say to Steve Lucchetti, congratulations for Steve. I'm sorry you're leaving. You're my best friend, brother, from Jack.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Steve.
Well, thank you, everyone. Very much appreciated. Thank you, everyone, for coming and staying. I don't really have a speech. I just want to say, like everyone mentioned, Chief Rodriguez, my goal was to do the best job possible for the citizens of Sonoma. I grew up here. My family's still here. My grandparents are resting peacefully at Mountain Cemetery. My wife and my son, who are here. It's been a good run. I can't complain. I've given it my all. I think I've done a pretty good job. I'm going to continue to live in the city of Sonoma and hopefully be able to volunteer and contribute as the years go on. But I just want to thank everyone. The team that I work with has been great. They haven't been letting me take a call for the last few months here. They just keep shagging them and taking care of me, and I really appreciate it. And for Letty for staying and Jimmy and his wife for being here, I really appreciate it. You guys are the best, everyone here. And that's about all I have to say. But thank you very much, council.
Don't sit down yet.
Okay.
I would like to, before we present you with something, I'd like if anyone would like to offer some remarks regarding Deputy Lucchetti. I personally know that I depend on you. I said, was Lucchetti there? Was Lucchetti there? So I know I just always depend on you. You're someone that really cares about the people around you, regardless of their station in life.
Yeah.
You're just as respectful to anyone, including people who can't, take care of themselves. So I really appreciate what you've done for all of us.
Anytime.
Thank you.
No problem. You guys probably don't know me as well as Madeline, but Jack, I've seen you at Farmer's Market a few times, and thank you very much. And Kelso, we've ran into each other too, so much appreciated. It's been a good run, like I said. I've really enjoyed it. I'm very fortunate, very lucky. I think it was a decision to go now instead of later and just kind of do some traveling and spend time with family and do some other things and let the younger generation kind of follow behind me. And it's a great organization. I appreciate the Sheriff's Department and the Police Department for hiring me and letting me work here. It's not an easy job, but great people that work out here. You're in good hands.
Thank you so much. And now the council. Still not over, Steve. So, can you hear me on this? Yes. All right, Steve, I wanted to give you Distinguished Service Award from the City of Sonoma. Steve Lucchetti, Deputy, for your service to the City of Sonoma, 1998 to 2021, presented on behalf of the City Council, City staff, and the citizens of the City of Sonoma. In grateful recognition of your selfless and dedicated service to the community. I'm going to repeat that.
No.
In grateful recognition of your selfless and dedicated service to the community.
That's awesome.
Thank you so
very
much.
That
Thank
is
you,
great.
Steve.
Thank you.
All right. Let me see those smizes. 1, 2, 3.
We're moving on to the consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the city council or staff request specific items to be removed for separate action. And I think, is that with the special, that it's in here? I don't know if I have the latest, but it's in here as part of the consent agenda. I don't see it. I have a packet.
Yeah, so it's just on the, it's on this separate document, but in
Okay,
essence,
yes. All right.
that's the letter.
Thank you.
It's the letter
Okay.
to the county regarding the redistricting. So when you take your consent calendar act, just make it clear you're approving both consent calendars, the special and the regular.
Thank you. So, I guess at this point, okay. Do you, oh, here. It's this. Do you have that?
Sorry, the staff report authorizes the mayor to send a letter that has yet to be prepared. Staff would work with council to prepare the letter. But it's really authority to send a letter to the county regarding
All right.
redistricting.
So, what is the pleasure of the council?
Can I pull that item 2.1 on the special consent calendar, the letter to discuss?
Is anyone? Oh,
Aye.
That was what I was going to pull, so thank you.
okay.
I would like to pull 5.7, financial year and the financial report.
All right. So, at this point, I'm going out to the public. Okay. I'm taking this out to the public, and if there are any comments regarding these items, our consent agenda, seeing none. Are there any people in the Zoom land who have any comments?
No one's raising their hand, Madam Mayor.
All right, thank you. So at this point, what is the pleasure?
I move that we approve the consent calendar with the exception of item 5.7 and item 2.1 on the special agenda.
Okay, do I have a second?
Make second on that, please.
Thank you. Could I have a roll call vote?
Vice Mayor Dean,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnett,
Aye.
Councilmember Felder,
Aye.
Councilmember Lowe,
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Item do you want to look at?
Do 5.7 first.
Oh, okay, Jack?
My item is 5.7, the general fund preliminary year-end financial report. I do have a couple of the questions.
Oh, I know, mine is this.
As to the reserve fund, I didn't see on the reserve fund the balance on our sheet. I know that it is not necessary, but I would like to ask how much right now on our reserve of account.
Good evening. I'll just kind of take you through the fiscal year 2021 okay, so the beginning fiscal year fund reserve balance is projected to be 8.9 million. And with the expected fiscal year 2021 use of reserves of approximately 739,000, our ending general fund reserve should be about 8.2 million. In the fiscal year 21-22 budget, we had projected we would use approximately 1.5 million of reserves before any ARPA funding. However, we forecasted revenues really conservatively. With the first quarter transient occupancy tax in, we think revenues for the year will come in higher, barring any unexpected shutdowns or other emergencies. So now believe the general fund reserve, with half of the ARPA funding coming in this year, which we've already received of 1.3 million, that the fiscal year end 2021 should be about the same as fiscal year as fiscal year 2021 at 8.1 million.
Thank you. My second question is, can we send over our lost revenue from American Rescue Plan and money directly to reserve fund or indirectly? We still using the general account.
So maybe the answer to that is, yeah, for your ARPA funds, you can't directly put it into reserves, but you can use it to substitute for other general fund expenses. So the bottom line effect is indirectly you be replenishing your general fund reserve.
So my understanding is in this way, no longer we can take any money from our reserve account at this situation.
Right. I think our projection is that we will end roughly the same, I think, fund balance as we had, not fund balance, beginning fund balance as fiscal year 2021, 8.9, we'll end the year at around 8.9 if you count in the ARPA funding using that for general fund expenses.
Well, 8.82 because we have a loss of about 760,000.
I see.
So, yeah,
Is this the number audited or not yet?
not yet.
Okay. Do you have any in the schedule and the time frame to audit?
We're working on both audits, 1920 and 2021, and we hope to have them done by, it's not going to be done by the end of the year, but we're hoping real soon. So with Liz on now and her getting up to speed on it, but we're working with the auditor and we'll have them done as soon as possible.
What is the time frame for the next part of American Rescue Fund coming in?
It'll come in July of 2022.
Thank you so much.
And I just would like to piggyback on that. I think the council, our last sessions regarding reserves was at 17%. Do you know what percentage this is? There are reserves at this point?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
So our reserve, so if we're projecting fund balance 8.2, that represents how much percent of operating expenses for reserves? That's like 40% or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You can.
So that it's actually about 40% of operating expenses. So, yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
the 17% is what we actually put aside
Right.
for reserves. So that's always set as in our reserve policy.
Yeah, because so much went into that. I just wanted to know if we're still, we're doing better than that, but thank you so much.
Yeah. So we that's what we keep it at. But
Does anyone else have any questions? None? I guess we'll move on to your issue.
Well, yeah.
We should get some public comment and then we can
Oh,
approach.
sorry. Now out to public comment. Anyone here from our audience would like to speak to this issue? Seeing none. Are there any people out there in Zoom? None. All right, thank you. So I think we can vote on this. Okay, so what's the pleasure of the council?
I move this for the motion to approve the general fund preliminary year-end fiscal report as is.
And a second, please?
I'll second.
Thank you. May I have a roll call?
Vice Mayor Dean,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnett,
Aye.
Councilmember Felder,
Aye.
Councilmember Lowe,
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
So now we're moving on to, I think, what was that, 2.1? Mr. Barnett? Comment?
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Lowe and I pulled 2.1 to discuss sending a letter to the Board of Supervisors encouraging them to keep the Sonoma Valley, roughly defined as the Sonoma Valley Unified School District, and Kenwood in the same district. Obviously, they're Sonoma County Board of Supervisors every 10 years redistricts, and from what I understand, and Councilmember Lowe may have more updated information on this, that they have selected a map that does keep the Sonoma Valley in one district, but they may be sort of tweaking it here and there over the next few weeks with a final decision to come, I believe, on December 1st. And so I just, I think we all wanted to just sort of send a letter of support to the Board of Supervisors to thank them for keeping us in one district and to encourage them to, when that final map is approved, to keep it in one district. And I would also suggest Council, if Councilmember Lowe is interested, I know the agenda packet says that you would staff would work with me in drafting the letter, but I believe you may even have more updated information. I'd be more than happy for her to work on it as well.
Yes, thank you. Yesterday, the Board of Supervisors took a unanimous vote on the current draft, which does do exactly what we're talking about, keep the district, Sonoma Valley, whole. So it was just my interest in making sure that whatever we draft, it's more of a thank you for your initial position, rather than we don't really need to do any arm twisting at this point. I think from what I understood in the sort of asked around today, that there may be some small minor changes, but they're going to be small, and that the actual architecture upon which they're going to build the Board of Supervisor districts will be what they passed yesterday. So that's good news for us, and I just think we need to be encouraging, because they're on the right track as far as we're concerned. Other cities may not be so inclined, but I think as far as we're concerned, we should continue to support them.
Thank you. I really appreciate your comments, Council Members Lowe and also Council Member Barnett. So we're going out to the public right now for any comments regarding what we've just discussed. Hearing none, I will go out to Zoom. So what is the pleasure of the council for 2.1?
I move that we authorize Mayor Agramonte to send a letter to the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors recommending the board, thanking them for keeping Sonoma Valley in District 1 and encouraging them to continue to do so.
I second.
Thank you. And Council Member Felder, may I have a vote? Roll call, sorry.
Vice Mayor Dean,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnett,
Aye.
Councilmember Felder,
Aye.
Councilmember Lowe,
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion
Thank
carries
you.
unanimously.
Thank you for doing that, Councilmember Barnett. I think it was like an 11th hour move.
Yes.
And it worked really well. Thank you, Garrett, for putting that together, and our city clerk. I appreciate that. We are now moving on to our regular calendar. Oh, sorry. We're now moving on to our regular calendar. And let me see. Okay, 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, our regular calendar. Ay, ay, ay. Oh. Oh, God, where's my little cheat sheet? No.
Just use the arrows back and forth.
So, Madam Mayor and honorable members of the City Council, the Memorandum of Understanding, the Environmental Preferred Procurement Policy, and the introduction of the SB 1383 Implementation Ordinance represents a multi-year effort by staff and our essential partners, our JPA, Zero Waste Sonoma. Especially, I want to comment on Zinzi Tan's incredible work, and our franchised hauler, Sonoma Garbage, especially with the assistance of Ken Wells. We have had monthly meetings and numerous communications working hard to interpret and comprehend the law and Cal Recycle's regulations sufficient to ensure the city's compliance. So I'm now going to give a presentation on the major elements of SB 1383 and to discuss the draft implementation ordinance. So SB 1383 is basically a climate action law. It is the short-lived Climate Pollution Reduction Act. So the landfilling of organics generates methane, which is a powerful greenhouse gas, and it's increasingly becoming the focus of climate actions. And landfills generate about 20% of methane in California. SB 1383 requires separation and recycling of organics at the point of generation. That's the primary focus, so it's a organics recycling law, to put it succinctly. So organics in the ordinance and the Cal Recycle regulations include food scraps, yard and green waste, organic textiles and carpets, paper products, untreated lumber and wood, and manure. This graph here just shows this is the last time a waste characterization was done for the entire county collectively, but it shows you that about 56.2% of landfill waste is organic under this ordinance law. And this is basically is on par with most other communities and jurisdictions as well. And the intent of the law is to reduce this amount by 75%. So looking at the universe of generators in Sonoma, the city of Sonoma, in 2020 there were 4,296 what we call generators. So a multifamily unit may have multiple units, but that would be one generator. So these would be like addresses that the hauler would stop at. So it's 4,296. And this just shows you very briefly all the waste collected in Sonoma. There is a slight decline here, which is good because we also have an increasing population. So we're at least on the positive track. But again, it shows you the significant amount of organics that are going to have to be pulled out and separated out and then recycled or composted separately. So SB 1383 must segregate and recycle organics through separation and collection. So that's at the point of generation. So it's segregated into the container that I'll talk about in a second, and then it's collected and then brought to a composting facility. This requires, it mandates education and outreach by multiple partners, and then of course compliance and enforcement, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a second. It also seeks to close the loop. So the city itself has to procure compost and mulch and recycled paper products. And then there has to be a system where commercially edible food is captured. So part of that is to prevent landfilling, but also to help reduce food insecurity by not throwing away edible food. So there's requirements for all these entities. The jurisdictions are JPA, generators, the hauler, also commercial food generators and food recovery organizations. I'm going to talk mostly about what's the requirements for the city and a little bit for the hauler and generator as well. So one of the requirements of the law is that the city must have an enforcement program for all generators, and that's pretty much commercial, which includes multi-unit dwellings, and residential. Now the state may issue a notice of violation or penalty to the city itself for non-compliance, and I'll talk about what the requirements are specifically for the city. But also the city can have a notice of violation or penalty for non-compliance of generators within the city. So this is a unique approach to foster compliance. Whoops. There. So some of the push too many buttons at the same time. So the violations that can occur to the city are if there is no organic waste ordinance, and that's what's on being introduced tonight. If there isn't contractual agreement with a hauler to comply with the regulations, the good news is I'll talk about that. That's all set. The city did that back in June of this year. There has to be an edible food recovery program, and some of that is going to be as presented in the memorandum of understanding earlier. That's going to be included in that, as well as implementation records and annual report submissions, which will be handled primarily by Zero Waste Sonoma, or JPA, as spelled out in the MOU. So January 1st, 2022, state enforcement is supposed to begin. This is what we were operating under, but back in September, SB 619 was passed that allows cities to request an extension for these items until March 1st, 2022. So one would assume that the enforcement would track with that as well. By January 1st, 2022, the city must have enacted the required ordinance, which is what we're talking about tonight. Also provide, monitor, enforce organics collection for all generators. And I'm going to talk about primarily focus on these 6 items here for the rest here. Conduct annual education and outreach, adopt environmentally preferred purchasing policy, begin the procurement of recovered organics, and then establish and support an edible food recovery program. The law also states that by January 1st, 2024, city enforcement must begin. I mean, the whole point is it recognizes this is a significant change in behavior and systems, and so it's going to take a while to do that. But we've been active, the city's been working on that for at least over a year, trying to get to there, so it's not going to be 0 to 60 immediately. So we've been working on that, definitely. So I know that one of the thoughts is, how does this enforcement structure work? So this slide here talks about the compliance monitoring enforcement structure amongst all the partners and the categories of regulated entities. So we have the state, that's Cal Recycle. We have our franchise hauler, which is the Sonoma Garbage Collectors, the city, which we state as code enforcement, and then our JPA, which is Zero Waste Sonoma. So the compliance monitoring system looks like this. The state is going to do compliance monitoring of the city. In other words, just monitoring to make sure that we are in compliance with all the requirements. The JPA will be conducting compliance monitoring of generators, self-haulers, and commercial edible food generators, but also entities not under the city jurisdiction, which would be schools in this in our city. The hauler will also be conducting compliance monitoring of generators and the other entities because they typically are serving them. A non-compliance notification is where the hauler would notify the city, and the JPA would notify also notify the city if there observations or documentation of non-compliance with the requirements. And finally, the enforcement is the state can enforce against the city, and the state can enforce against entities not under the city jurisdiction, whereas the city would enforce against these generators. But I want to make an important point is this is a rather simplistic diagram in using the words of compliance enforcement. So the entire focus of enforcement is to move non-complying entities back into compliance. And so there's many tools in the tool chest to do that. And in fact, the hauler and the JPA will be working on that by doing education, outreach, discussions, letters, all these things to do that. Only when there is just non-compliance, a refusal to compliance, that's when enforcement would be the option. So it would be a long time before that happens. I just want to make sure everyone sees that. Again, the focus is education, outreach, encouragement, and stuff that we're doing right now. So again, the ordinance has to be enacted by January 1st, 2022, and implement and enforce SB 1383 requirements. Part of that also is the self-hauling generator requirements, which is actually included in the draft ordinance tonight, and also the procurement requirements. So the way staff has recommended is that you can include all the procurement requirements in the ordinance, the mandatory procurement requirements, or you can reference them and then include them in the what we're calling the environmentally preferred procurement policy, which was, I believe, on the consent calendar. Number 2 is provide, monitor, enforce organics collection for all generators. The city has a franchise agreement with Sonoma Garbage Collectors. And through that, the requirement is that customers have to be provided with 3 color-coded containers or lids. So organics containers either have to be green or a green lid. Recycling has to be blue or blue lid, and trash can be gray or black or have a gray or black lid is the requirement. And that's supposed to be this universal color system for the entire state so that jurisdictions will all have the same color. And this also just works on compliance because you don't have to think about it. Like I mentioned, the garbage contract with So Much Garbage Collectors was modified back in June 2021. It was actually modified a year earlier to start this, but this is where the very specific requirements to conduct compliance monitoring were implemented. So part of this is in that contract, SGC's responsibilities were delineated with compliance monitoring and reporting. So they will be identifying occurrences of contamination. So contamination means if there is organics in the trash, recycling in the organics, vice versa. It's just that the material is in the proper container. And they can do that through their system because when they have a side loader, when they empty the container contents, they can see it visually. So they will be able to do this all the time, constant monitoring. Whereas other companies don't have this system, so they can't see it. So we're very fortunate to have a very efficient system in that perspective. If there is contamination, again, they have to report to Zero Waste Sonoma and city code enforcement. But in the meantime, the whole goal is to get that entity into compliance through education, outreach, and so forth. And again, enforcement will be the city's responsibility for generators. Another requirement is that all organics have to be accepted in residential carts. So previously, this was not the case in Sonoma because of the operation. So meat, fish, dairy products were not allowed. They are now allowed as of July 2021. So the city's already in compliance with that aspect. All residents have to be provided an organic cart by the end of 2021. This was completed in September 2021. All commercial dumpsters, because they have to be those 3-color systems, this was in the contract that they had to be repainted by the end of 2021. According to some garbage collectors, it's halfway done, but it will be completed by the end of December. So again, we're very in good shape there. There's new required labels on all color-coded containers. So these are more simple, graphic, focused labels. Customers that receive those new organic carts have all have new labels, which is about 50% of the residential customers. And labels are being added to existing carts, which is nearly complete at this point. Also in the contract, the fall 2021 education outreach campaign. It was obviously on hiatus during COVID. At least their direct interactions were. So all customers with new carts had had a sorted Sonoma flyer attached to the container. So this is something that we developed with our JPA, which was very, again, graphics heavy, so people don't have to read and think about it. Typically, people in solid waste field like to write lengthy statements on everything so you know exactly what it is, and we chose to go for the graphics because no one reads those, very few people. Also, the majority of residential customers that have email accounts were notified by email of the upcoming requirements or organic segregation. And then every customer was also mailed a sorted Sonoma flyer by Sonoma Garbage Collectors. They also tabled the Tuesday night farmers market to hand out the flyers and answer any questions as well to have that direct interaction. And then they will have to keep and maintain records, which hasn't started yet, but that will be starting in 2022. So just briefly a little bit about commercial generators. They are going to have to segregate organics from trash. There were previous laws, one about mandatory organics recycling and mandatory recycling, but this law has dropped the quantity level. They also have to provide containers for collection of organics and recycling in the front of house for customers. So what that means is if you are a restaurant, for example, and you have a trash container in the front where customers are, the law requires that you also have to have organics and recycling, assuming organics are produced. And that's only in the front of the house. It doesn't include bathrooms. And this does not include multiple dwelling units or multiple family units. Also for commercial customers, containers have to be properly color coded, again labeled as well. And they also have to periodically inspect for contamination. If found, they're required to educate their employees on what is proper containers and what's proper segregation. So back to the city requirements, the city is required to conduct annual education and outreach, focusing on organic waste generators, residents, businesses, and institutions that are under its jurisdiction. And again, we have been doing this. Also, our JPA has been sending out letters as well. So we're really been focusing on doing this, ramping up to in preparation for the effective date. And also commercial edible food generators as well. They have a little bit different requirement. I'll just briefly touch on in a second. And also self-haulers. So those are individuals that have chosen not to use the service, but bring the materials to previously the landfill or recycling facility. They now will have to also bring organics, if they generate them, to the organics facility. The city also has to establish an edible food recovery program. A lot of this is implemented with and through our JPA. But commercial edible food generators will have to have access to food recovery services. There's actually a pretty good program in Sonoma County and Sonoma Valley right now, but we just have to make sure that the quantity generated is, there's enough food recovery capacity to handle that. And most of this is going to be done by our JPA, Zero Waste Sonoma. They also are going to do annual education and outreach. And the city must also, if there's more edible food that's generated that can be recovered, then the program has to be expanded somehow. And that, again, is addressed in the MOU with Zero Waste Sonoma. Regarding commercial edible food generators, based on the best data that we have right now, we believe there's 16 of them in the city. It's broken up into what's called Tier 1 generators and Tier 2. Most of them are Tier 1 generators, which are grocery stores, food service providers, and wholesale food vendors. Tier 2 generators, we don't have any of those except the schools with on-site food facility. We believe there's 5 of them. And their requirement basically is that they have to send commercially edible surplus food. Schools, it's not so much commercial, but it's edible surplus food to food recovery organizations. That's their basic requirement. And there's some reporting and record keeping. So briefly, kind of wrapping up here, to talk about the city's progress. The organic waste ordinance is being introduced tonight. The contractual agreement with the hauler to comply with regulations has been done. The edible food recovery program and the other items will be implemented with our JPA through the Memorandum of Understanding. So from a progress perspective, I think the city is in really good shape and appears to be on track to meet the original effective date of the statute. And just talk briefly about city's costs. Most of these are unknown at this point, but they are partially offset by a return franchise fee that was in last year's, not 2021, but the previous year's contract, franchise agreement contract. There are annual costs. There are some record keeping and reporting. They will be pretty minimal, but that's a labor cost. Education and outreach will require some labor and some supplies with flyers and other aspects. The big unknown is the procurement of organics, which is something that was included in one of the staff reports, I believe, in the environmentally preferred procurement policy. At a maximum, it's going to be about $25,000 per year. But we're working, the city and other jurisdictions in Sonoma County are quite concerned about this for various reasons, working with our JPA to come up with an alternative approach that ensures compliance, has a better use of the material and a substantially lower cost. So that's something that should be available for consideration sometime early next year. And then periodic costs if there's enforcement. Also the mandatory procurement of recycled paper and paper products. It's not known at this point if that's going to be a marginal increase in cost. It depends on that, but that's something that should be considered. And that concludes staff presentation. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Mr. Toy, I passed you over. Is there anything you wanted to say before we go to questions, or?
Oh, no, I think Travis
Okay.
answered.
All right,
her
thank you. I just want to
presentation
let you
covered
know I
everything.
missed that. You know, I do have a question, but I want to ask if anyone else has a question.
I do, yeah.
Mr. Councilmember.
Thank you. Thank you, Travis, for that presentation. I actually was going to ask you about the estimated costs, and so I'm glad that you put that in there at the end. Obviously, it's unknown at this point, but do you have any sort of ballpark estimate for annual costs to the city for compliance? Like, are we talking 100,000, 50,000, 10,000, $1 million, you know?
Setting aside the procurement costs, I don't, but it would, it's probably would be covered under, like the sustainability coordinator position would cover most of that.
Most of the
whatever that
labor,
is.
yeah.
Yeah, most of the labor and the supplies are probably under 5,000. But the procurement of the organics is the big unknown.
Okay. And I assume the state is not offering any sort of rebates for costs to the city to enforce their law, which is a good law. I'm not sure. I'm just.
Yeah, I understood that there was the potential. So, for example, I'm tracking my time right now.
Yeah.
That might be reimbursed, but I can't speak about that. And that's just the labor to work on the ordinance and whatever. Most of the grants I've seen come through are really to start edible food programs and supporting some composting, because one of the big issues is that if all the jurisdictions procure the organics that they're required to, the capacity to produce that it's only 55%. So it's a big concern about supply and demand. So if demand's really high and the supply is low, we know what happens there. And so I know they're looking at trying to do that, but those are long-term, costly projects to create capacity.
Okay.
And those are the only things I've seen so far.
Great. Thank you.
Nothing. Just a thing. Thank you. Thank you for dedication on this issue. That is city in a compliant. That is number one important. Thank you.
So I do have a question. I was looking at the graphic of hauler, city code enforcement, and zero waste. So I think, Travis, first for you, and then of course for Mr. Toy, we sort of have a very small code enforcement. I mean, it's one person. So how does someone train in something? How do you do that? How do you make that transition to other understanding regulations or requirements, or it's somebody else that steps in?
Can I?
So I think the best way to describe the code enforcement, this is going to be a challenge for all small cities when it comes to this. So I think the strategy for everyone is education outreach to start with. And you'll go from there. After that, then it'll have to be either egregious, or maybe you do audits of random garbage and then you educate and outreach. So that's the strategy to start with. I think we'll wait to see if we need additional resources for code enforcement if it becomes an issue.
Thank you so much for that answer.
And if I could just follow, I mean, like the city manager said, we've already got this whole education outreach system, all three entities, and so we suspect that that's going to be pretty successful. And there are other options. That, again, code enforcement is the last step, and if we do everything right, it's going to be minimal, if ever. It's a small, it's a small city, so easier to handle, definitely.
Thank you, Travis. Any other questions from the council? Seeing none, I'd like to take this out to the public for comments. I'm seeing none from the public. What about Zoom?
We're going to be bringing in Tom Conlon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Appreciate the opportunity to be recognized here. I just wanted to commend Travis and the staff, as well as the staff of the hauler, for putting this project together, staff at Zero Waste Sonoma as well. This is a pretty well-baked plan compared to what I see happening in a lot of other cities. Sonoma is ahead of the curve on this one, I believe. I have some long-term concerns about the procurement question. I'll probably be talking to Travis about this a little bit more. But in general, I would like to be sure we have a way of making sure that the compost does come back into the city of Sonoma, that it doesn't end up escaping from the city and going to exclusively to farms outside of the city. I understand for the startup period that might not be feasible. We might have to rely on our farming partners. The other comment on enforcement, I agree that we don't need to be heavy-handed in enforcement, and we are a small city, and we can stay in front of this. If we do find that we have problems with compliance, I would recommend simply putting together a list of the parties that are having difficulty getting to comply long before doing anything more draconian. I'm sure we can encourage our commercial partners to do the right thing. I'm sure they want to, and it's just a matter of making sure that we can meet our climate goals together. So thanks for considering my comments tonight, Chris.
So did staff hear anything with Tom's comments or questions with regard to possibly an answer? I don't know if you've heard it.
Yeah, I did. Not at this time. Again, the procurement requirement mandates a certain annual purchase amount of organics, and we're looking at alternatives that were discussed in the staff report as potential alternatives that will be presented to City Council later on for consideration.
Right. Well, I really appreciate the graphics because it sort of simplifies that organizational structure of how we're supposed to get this done. So I really appreciate it. So I'll turn this over. So we have an ordinance to introduce. Is there anyone, do you have any other comments or questions? Or we can just move on to the ordinance? I'm good. Okay, everybody's fine? Would somebody like to introduce we have an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Sonoma, am I right? Adding chapter 7.10 to the municipal code to adopt regulations, requirements for the purpose of reducing disposal of organic waste and amending chapter 7.08 of the municipal code to conform to the nomenclature of and provisions in chapter 7.10.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Dean.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnett.
Aye.
Councilmember Felder.
Aye.
Councilmember Lowe.
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Move on. I apologize to people here for 7.2, but we are going to take a 5-minute break. Thank you. and possible action to adopt 2 resolutions approving commercial cannabis retail business regulations in order to open a request for proposal process for a second retail storefront commercial and cannabis business in the city implementing the provisions of Sonoma Municipal Code, including A, resolution approving administrative regulations and application procedures and guidelines, finding that the proposed administrative regulations and application procedures and guidelines are not projects pursuant to California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA guidelines, and are also exempt from CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines 15061B3 and B, resolution approving commercial cannabis fees, and 2, provide direction on timing for the new updated RFP process to Commerce Planning and Community Services Director. And I did that turn over to our Planning Director. I see you waiting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. David Storer here. Our first slide tonight, Rebecca, please, will be a brief overview. First one. Sorry. Oh, thanks, Karen. All right. I know I'm going to get this wrong. There we go. So just a brief outline, our storyline of where we've been with commercial cannabis. The year 2019 was the first year that we got started with this. In the summer, the City Council adopted 2 ordinances. Ordinance 3 dealt with the rules that we'll be talking about tonight in Title 5, and in Title 19, we dealt with the buffers, and you may recall that we had extensive community input on that with respect to the placement of where the commercial cannabis businesses were going to be located. With respect to those ordinances, there were 4 types of commercial cannabis businesses that were approved. One was a retail storefront, a non-store retail storefront, a manufacturing business, and a testing lab. It was in the month of December when the City Council adopted resolutions that actually adopted administrative regulations and also application procedures and guidelines. But those application procedures and guidelines related to the 2 retail types of businesses. One was a retail and then the non-retail. We had 10 proposers present their applications to the city. All of them were with respect to retail, not the non-retail. We took approximately from January to December to go through the RFP process and then to award the conditional certificate, which ultimately was awarded to Spark. So in the year 2021 that I've highlighted in yellow, there are 2 things going on there. In the blue, I'll talk about this in just a minute briefly, and then you'll see the other actions that were going on throughout that year. So Spark, after they received the conditional certificate, in March they presented before the DRHPC, and then for their use permit, the land use entitlement, the use permit, that was granted in May. That action was appealed, and throughout the summer, staff worked with the appellant and with Spark, and resulted in a modification to the application that went to the DRHPC in August, and then to the Planning Commission in September, where it was approved. And since September, Spark has been issued a building permit, demolition permit, and the like, and are well on their way to having that facility at 19315 Sonoma Highway completed, and they anticipate occupancy in the first quarter of 2022. And that information that I've just outlined is all in the staff report. Concurrent with that action of Spark, as they were proceeding beyond the conditional certificate, ultimately they'll get to a point of being issued a commercial cannabis business permit by the city manager, and I'll get to that on the next slide. But as you can see on the bottom rung of this slide, you'll see that the City Council in April modified the ordinance they adopted in 2019 to allow a second retail. There's still on our books the ability to issue business permits to non-retail manufacturing and testing labs, but that was not then, and perhaps not as the desire of the council at this point. Then throughout the spring and summer, as you're all familiar, we went through some changes at the management level at City Hall and also at your City Council. There were changes. Throughout that time, we were working on a new process, and that direction for a new process to include an application at the time of the location of an application at the time concurrently rather than perhaps having it changed. So we reverted to the same general process as the first process, but have indeed shortened the timeline. I'll get into that in a moment. And here we are tonight. The last two great things are what you're being asked to take action upon tonight with respect to new administrative regulations and then a new application process with procedures. And something went away. Yeah, sorry. This next slide is in your packet, but I'll just discuss it briefly. What I tried to do is show in red those particular items that devolve upon the proposers versus those that are in orange that devolve upon the city staff and our process. Really, it depends on the number of proposals that we receive, and clearly we can do some time savings as we go through the RFP process, as we select finalists to be presented to your council, and then upon awarding of the conditional certificate, we can go through the land use process as Spark did when they were granted their conditional certificate. So what we have done is similar to the first process. We have the site search to come after you've determined the type of proponent that you want to work with with their particular business model per se. And then as we go through the planning commission process for a use permit, they would then get a building permit. We would review that and issue that. Depending on the site location, would determine the length. And then they ultimately, on bullet number 3, you'll see there that there's a commercial cannabis business permit. Once they have completed all of the conditions of approval at the use permit stage and received an occupancy permit, then they apply to the city manager for a a commercial cannabis business permit. Next, please, Rebecca. In the review and in the staff report, I've provided an update as to the other commercial cannabis or retail storefronts, if you will, in the valley. At the September, I think it was 7th meeting or so, we reported that an appeal of a project up on Arnold and Madrone was going to the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors denied the appeal and upheld the permit, so to speak, and it has since been, the county has since been provided a lawsuit with respect to CEQA. And those things can take time, and generally speaking, they can be done within a year, depending on how complex it is. That particular site is about 4.1 miles from our city limits, up there at the northwest corner of our city. There's a project that is still awaiting analysis down on Fremont Drive. They hope to have that to the Board of Adjustments in March of next year. The one up at in Kenwood is 10 miles away, and that has been deemed incomplete, and the county is waiting for the applicant to provide information so that they can be complete and deemed ready for processing. Item number 4 is Spark, and I've just outlined that. The purpose of providing that was to enable the City Council to determine if there's sufficient competition that will be likely in the near future, if you will, in Sonoma Valley. With respect to our recommendation is to understand fully the financial impacts to our city and to also ascertain the community benefits and potential impacts that were discussed when the awarding of the conditional certificate was granted. And it's staff's recommendation that we receive at least 6 months worth of financial data and information in order for us to evaluate that impact fiscally and also look at the impacts that may arise and also the community benefits, because that was, again, another big part of the process of awarding the certificate to Spark. We anticipate that if we have an opening of Spark in the first quarter, we could get some data and be ready to go in the fall of 2022 with a release of the RFP. And that is our recommendation at this time, and this concludes staff's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Storer. Are there any questions from the city council?
I have a few questions. Thank you, David. Just a few random questions that came up as you were giving your presentation. Have we ever had any interest in the manufacturing or testing lab? Like, has anyone ever reached out to the city?
No, no, they haven't, number one, and from what I understand in the trade, and having a testing lab will be quite a catch. I think there's only 40 of those in the state. So, but the answer is no. It may be because the city limited them to types of manufacturing that is less of a concern, type NMP permits, type 6, I think they're called.
Okay. Another question I had is in the the process, when the council or staff, or I don't know exactly how it's determined, but when finalists are determined, they all need a site at that point? And I'm just curious why. Like, why wouldn't we just evaluate the business operation, select one, and then they go find a site, and then they go through the land use process?
Yeah, excuse me, Rebecca, if you want to go back, that is indeed how it works, Councilmember Barnett. We had a discussion at your, this one right here, yeah, the one that's on the screen, there we go, thank you. That is indeed the process the first time around. We came to your council and discussed the option of having a site at the application stage, and the direction we received was to reverse it back. So you will indeed, in that phase 1 through step 3, I'm just going to say, have a beauty contest.
I thought I read that there were like finalists, and that they each have to have a site. Am I mistaken?
Yeah, and it's easy to do. So it's been maybe I can't read it very well, but yeah, by the time you get to step 3, that'll be when we present to your council the top 5 finalists. If we only have 5 proposers, then that will be the number. But for example, in the case where we had 10. We went through a process. If you see the step 1 and step 2 there, that's where we had a proposal committee made up of myself, the police chief, and the chamber. We went through a scoring process in steps 1 and 2 of the businesses, and then we made a recommendation of the top 5 finalists to the council. Once they selected the top 5, they then went on to phase 2 to select a site. And you'll see that in the first bullet under site 2, phase 2, where it's all red.
Okay, so wait, at this point there are still multiple dispensary candidates, right?
There's let's say for example there's 10.
Yeah.
Now on step 3 there of phase 1, you've got it down to 5.
Right.
And you tell those 5 to go find a site.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think we're saying the same thing. Sorry.
No, but I'm saying, why do we do that? I mean, why wouldn't we just evaluate the business operation, and then they go through the whole process, they get a certificate, and then they go find a site?
Well, you can certainly do that too.
And go through the planning process.
Yeah.
And if the planning commission doesn't like the site, then they go find another one. I mean,
that certainly could be done. That would certainly cut the timeline down.
it's just an idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I concur with what you're saying, because what if they all go out and they could find the same site? I mean, let's face it, the town is very small. And I think that would be, I think the important thing is to find the right provider. And then, I mean, the site, that's a second process. So I concur with Councilmember Barnett's assessment of this.
So, Mr. Storer, could you explain that? Maybe even Garrett, if you weren't with us during that time, but what was the purpose of that, or why the council did that?
Excuse me. The best way I can explain it is that the process on phase 1 was quite a lengthy process, because you have to do a lot of background checks. You went through that whole scoring process. There's also I didn't mention it, but there's also an appeals period process in there as well that comes after step 2 and before step 3, and that's in the ordinance or in the administrative regulations that we've provided. And certainly what the council wanted to do, and it was not a problem, they wanted to be able to see where the sites could be relative to one another. Clearly, there was one that all of us knew about, and then it was a matter of where else they could be. And there ended up being about 4, if I remember, where a couple of them had multiple opportunities to go with different vendors. But certainly we can condense that and shorten the time.
So I have a question. Does anybody else have a question at this point? Okay.
This is just curiosity. I would like thinking in a different way. It's possible for a landlord to apply that is specific in a place. Could it be in the future? Could it be operated as the the store? Because this is a huge investment, remodeling. That is a totally different. But anyway, I'm not sure in the other cities they have this kind of experience, or how do you think?
It seems to me that you want to know who the operator is going to be before you issue a conditional certificate. And a property owner may not be interested in being that operator, so at that point you're just banking a site at that point for a future operation.
All right.
One other comment with respect to Phase 1, Step 3. Let's say, for instance, you only get 3 proposers. You go straight to issuing the conditional certificate. You'll probably know the sites that are in town, but you won't know them unless you ask for the site before you issue the conditional certificate. So it's, do you like the operator? If it's 3, for example, you're not going to know where their sites are.
I guess.
Are you finished?
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, I guess my point is, it would be nice if we went through the whole process, evaluated the business operation, and then awarded the certificate. And then I feel like that business would have more leverage to find the best site for them, where if you have to have a site going in, I feel like that perhaps gives a little more leverage to the landlord. And if we're trying to, and one of my goals was always to foster like a smaller sort of Sonoma Valley based operation, it might be difficult for some of those to, that's just sort of the way I'm looking at it. And that also leads me to another question I have. In the ranking system, like when you give points and stuff, is it possible or perhaps even legal to like give, to weigh, give extra weight to a Sonoma Valley based smaller operation as part of the evaluation?
Yes, you'll see that scoring process. It's not in there, but it could certainly be added. I can tell you that there was a lot of compression in the scoring. There was very little between number 1 and number 10. So that may be a tiebreaker, so to speak. One thought here is that we could dispense with most of Phase 2 and do a Phase 1, Step 4, perhaps, where you issue the conditional certificate, and then, like you said, then have that person, and you can actually issue more than one conditional certificate, by the way, or you can issue 0, depending on the proposers. Then what you would do is, once that conditional certificate is granted and awarded, you could then let the applicant determine where they want to be and then apply for a use permit, which is our typical process anyway. When applications come in, we don't know where the sites are until they come in with an application to do so.
If I could just chime in on Councilmember Barnett's question. There are constitutional issues with local preferences like that.
Right.
Especially in situations like this where the city is not acting as a market participant, we are acting as a regulator. In those situations, there's the Dormant Commerce Clause, which says that government cannot discriminate against people who are from different locations within the country, essentially. Right. I think that's something that we can look at, and we can try to perhaps find other ways to identify individuals that have stronger connections with the community and give them some type of preference. But we need to be careful about how we do that.
Thank you.
I just thought of another thing too. When you see Phase 2 there, it says site and final vendor selection. What we have done is, in order to try to expedite or shorten the process, I did eliminate the zoning verification letter, which was another step along the way where we ensure that the proposer has actually got a site where there are no problems with buffers and the like. So clearly that could be a condensed phase altogether.
Thank you. And then I just have one final question. Can you talk to me about, I think we talked about this earlier in the year when we had a similar conversation when we were still on Zoom, but just about the amount of time, like staff time it takes to conduct this process with a consultant, without a consultant, current staff capacity, priorities, etc.
Yeah, that certainly came up at a prior meeting, and we do anticipate perhaps not having me be as involved, but use a consultant to do those things. The crunch time for me personally in the first process was when we did phase 1, step 1, and step 2. That clearly was an important part of the process and involved a lot of my time. And so with the aid of a consultant like an HDL, for example, they can take more of an advanced role that I would be a project manager, so to speak. The thing that concerns me is the amount of time, not so much on this, but now on other things like state mandates that we have. We now have a state mandate, the housing element. We've been involved in a very complex RENA process that will be concluded in December, hopefully at ABAG. There is a gun at our head, so to speak, that we have until January of the following year to actually have our housing element in place now. Yes, we have a consultant. Yes, we have Wendy working on it, but it still involves my time to make sure the right pieces are there for us to get a certified housing element. With respect to timelines, we have other serious projects with timelines. We have the Jasper applications. We'll be talking about that later in the agenda. There are timelines that are guided by an agreement that we entered into with Mr. Jasper. We also have an SB 35 application on First Street East that dictates, we've got timelines relating to that as well. I'm still involved with council on a litigation case that will probably ramp up this next year, along with some ordinances like the residential component. You might have seen the discussions of the Planning Commission on SB 9 and implementation of that. And we'd certainly, as staff, like to get some multifamily objective design standards created. We also have the historic train district, and I feel bad for that project because we've always been kicking it down the road, and the train hasn't left that station yet.
Yeah, I approved that when I was on the Design Review Commission.
So,
in like 2015.
I'm bringing it up because it's the one that always drops off the list. We also have some administrative code changes that your council has established as a priority, along with your council's directive to do more work with me personally involved on the historic resources inventory for our local inventory. So yeah, there's a lot of things that are out there that demand my time. We have 2 associate planners that are all trying to keep up with current projects. This last year, we're up to now 50 projects that have either gone to the DRHPC or the Planning Commission, and that's a lot of labor. You can ask my staff on that. Sorry for the long explanation, but yeah, that's the demand on our time.
Okay, thank you.
So, does anyone else have any questions?
Just to tag on to that,
Okay.
listening to the litany of all of these projects, that, not to put too fine a point on your previous comments, I think it does make sense to separate the planning process of the site from the approval process of the vendor. I see that as 2 separate things. They're going to take their own trajectory. They're going to have to stand in line with everything else as far as planning and the site is concerned. I'd like to see those separated and sort of, to me, that conforms more to the business model that we have for other things, and that makes more sense to me.
If I could just respond to that, it's a great comment. The thing that concerned me when we first created the 2019 process was this timeline that we were hoping and praying for the land use entitlements. And just knowing the businesses I do, I was concerned that we'd not get through that process within the prescribed timeline of a year, because as we all know, use permits can kind of go sideways. In this case, the one did, for good reasons. I'm not saying they're not good reasons, but when you try to pin down the timing on a use permit and building permits, there's a lot of squishiness in there. And so, yeah, it'd be good to separate that out.
Thank you.
Okay, so I would like to go back, Mr. Storer, to 6 months for financial data. You suggested that. Is that because you're examining the different applicants?
This would be waiting for Spark to be in operation, to open their doors
Oh,
once they've
see.
received a commercial cannabis business permit, which is number 3 there, from the city manager. That means basically you got everything done, the ribbon cutting's ready, they open up their doors, they operate for 6 months, and during that business cycle, they'll be providing us with data on a monthly basis. So we can analyze that data to look at the revenues, whether they're where they were expected to be, where they were not expected to be. And then we can also look at the community benefits. They have programs instituted as far as they're awarded that conditional certificate. And then we also were concerned about impacts, what kind of impacts there might be with respect to buffers, their impacts of meeting with the public, providing literature at the store. There's a lot of things that we need to do as part of that entitlement.
Basically, it's unknown, and that's why you're looking at it?
Yeah, I mean, clearly if you went a year, you get more data, but 6 months, I think, seems like the minimum amount necessary that
Okay.
we should get.
So I guess mix that up in my mind because that process of the first dispensary was pretty onerous, I think, for everybody. And I guess my question was, there were some people that dropped off because there was not a good picture of their finances. So I thought that's what you were talking about. So I'm glad you cleared that up for me. Thank you. Any questions to the staff aside from Mr. Storer that you heard that we'd like to address? Mr. Toy? Oh, sorry.
No, I do, once the council gets back to its deliberations, depending on how you want to do the phases, I do have a few questions, but I think that can wait till after public comment.
All right, thank you. So at this point, we're going to, thank you so much, go out to the public. If we have any public comments. And when you step to the podium, of course, I would appreciate your saying your name.
Gil Latimer, Grant Court, Sonoma. Good evening to the City Council. According to a recent Press Democrat article, competition in cannabis business is thriving in Santa Rosa, and sales continue to increase among the best operated dispensaries in the county. Meanwhile, staff reports that other Valley storefronts may be years away. We already know the proposed Glen Ellen dispensary may not survive a lawsuit brought against the county. How many delivery services have a permit with the city? The city's website shows 3. Eric Pearson suggested there were a dozen. If that is the case, how much tax revenue is lost through unpermitted deliveries? Adding a second dispensary with its own delivery service would put a dent in unauthorized services coming into town and increase tax revenue. We remind that the city's first cannabis consultant, HDL, presented in detail how the city could well support 2 dispensaries. HDL also estimated that between $250,000 and $400,000 could be generated for Sonoma. Aside from tax revenue, it also noted that for every $1 spent at a cannabis retailer, an additional $3 in benefit goes to the host city. The city gets half of 1% for regular sales tax items and 4.5% for cannabis items. So more dispensaries equal more revenue. But beyond this, the city also gets community benefits. Why give away tax revenue and community benefits from a second dispensary to the county? The city will not see a profit statement from Spark until a year after it has opened, and with startup costs, will almost certainly show a loss for the Sonoma location. So, if all the city gets in 6 months is sales tax information, what can it discern from that? If sales tax revenue is below expectations, this really doesn't tell you anything. It could be for a variety of reasons. Spark is not providing the products those in the valley desire. Spark is charging too much so buyers go elsewhere. Or valley residents don't know Spark is in business yet. After all, the city does not allow any signs on the building indicating that it is a cannabis dispensary. The longer we wait, the more tax revenue and community benefits we lose. The Sonoma Valley Cannabis Group recommends issuance of the new RFP without further delay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Latimer.
Josette Brozeiker, 1110 Loma Court. Last time I was here, I had to say I was a bit blindsided by council discussion and the request from Spark that they would like to operate for a year before a process was begun to select a second dispensary operator. Many of the points discussed were non-factual. Discussion that there is no support that dispensaries will open in unincorporated areas mean we do not need a second dispensary. Earlier today, I talked about perception and reality. I want us to look at the facts before us. There is a lawsuit to stop the Glen Ellen dispensary. This will drag on for a year or more. And why are we concerned about another business in the unincorporated area? Do we do this for wineries, tasting rooms, or other businesses? In reality, we are granting the wish of an operator to have a monopoly for a year if staff recommendation is followed to push the second dispensary process out till late next year. Again, do we study other types of businesses to see how they do before permitting additional businesses of the same type? And why are we not looking at the data, aka the reality of other small cities with 2 or more dispensaries, instead of what staff has proposed? This would save time, money, and be based on real data. As you know, I have a Sun column called Personal and Political, so I'm going to get a little personal here. This comment was posted in response to Gil Latimer's excellent opinion piece in the IT. There are many delivery companies outside of Sonoma Valley, including several Spark locations. This will keep most prices competitive. I could not help but respond. No, you are incorrect. As a medical cannabis user for 6 years, this is not true. Delivery is more expensive when the dispensary is farther away. People should not make comments if they don't have direct experience on an issue. Also, delivery services require a minimum purchase amount. So let's take my personal experience from last week. Mercy and Katati no longer carries the product I used. So for the past year, I've either used a delivery service based outside of our area that carries what I use, and they have a $200 minimum for purchase, though their item price is usually about $90. I'm going to run over. So I really just want to say that I think we can study data from other cities. I don't think we should be looking at trying to analyze what Spark is doing. It just seems to me that that's a waste of time, and that data may be inconclusive. We really can support 2 dispensaries, and I think if you look at other cities that have 2 or more dispensaries that are similar to us, you're going to find that. So I think we should start dealing with reality, and let's do it with compassion and understanding. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Josette.
Hi, Mayor Agramani and council members. My name is Eli Melrod. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Soulful. We're a licensed cannabis dispensary in the city of Sebastopol, one of 2 licenses that's been operating since 2017. And I'm coming here tonight to express our strong support to move forward with the RFP process in the town of Sonoma. We believe it's absolutely in the best interest of the residents of Sonoma in the town of Sebastopol. There was at one point 1 dispensary license, and based on support from the town, that was transitioned over to 2. We've been operating there now for almost 5 years. We've seen hundreds of thousands of dollars of tax revenue generated for the city of Sebastopol. We've seen meaningful community benefits, whether it's increased public safety, collaborations with local organizations and nonprofits, and both dispensaries in Sebastopol, Soulful included, have been able to be really strong community members and create real meaningful revenue for the city. I'd also like to acknowledge that there are certain dispensary models like Soulfuls that are really committed to sourcing from local farms, local manufacturers. There's a whole supply chain out there in Sonoma County, and many of those businesses right now, our industry, are challenged. It's been a really tough year for many of the supply chain businesses, and so it's not only having retail for consumers, but also to have outlets where local businesses, many of them are small farmers and manufacturers, can sell their products and see their products coming to market in their local community. And lastly, I'd say we're really eager to participate in the RFP process. We feel strongly that there's more than enough demand in Sonoma Valley and the town of Sonoma to support 2 dispensaries, and we strongly encourage the council tonight to move forward with the RFP process. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jason Kishinev. I'm running for Congress against Mike Thompson, District 5 or whatever district we're going to end up after redistricting. Far be it for me to argue in favor of free market capitalism because I'm a socialist, but isn't having choices and competing products what the American marketplace is supposed to be about? I think it's great that Sonoma is allowed cannabis to be sold here. I wish that my own city, American Canyon, would unclench a little bit and allow the same. But now it's time to open up a little more here in Sonoma and allow competing dispensaries. To say that one dispensary is enough is just like saying that one gas station is enough. People need choices. Some people like high-end stuff. Some people are bargain hunters. Some people like brands that can't necessarily be found at one dispensary. Some dispensaries might specialize in distillate cartridges or kief-infused pre-rolls, which may not necessarily be available at every location. All across the United States, people are starting to wake up to see that the reefer madness propaganda that's about legalized weed wasn't true. I could go on about the mythology, but I'm sure you've heard it all. I'm asking you on behalf of those who don't feel comfortable enough speaking on it themselves, and I think that's quite a lot, to allow the second to go ahead and start the process for the second dispensary, and maybe consider about going up to 4 to 6 dispensaries in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else?
Good evening. Can you hear me? My name is Leslie Hennessy. I'm a retired wine merchant from San Francisco. Got here about 3.5 years ago. And before I closed my store down in San Francisco, I had applied for and had received the availability to do a dispensary. So I delved very deeply into the model of it and found out that it's a good financial thing, but more than anything, it helps people. There are 4 categories that a dispensary dispenses. One is THC, and that's flower, product, cannabis. 2 that we don't really look at very much is CBD. That's cannabinoid oils, and those are non-THC, and they are what are saving people's lives and giving people the availability to sleep, helping in glaucoma, and they are not taxable by city cannabis tax, but they are taxable in sales tax. So we also have beverages, the huge growing market in a beverage that is $10 that you will get a little buzz on in about 30 minutes. Then there's all the other extra equipment. So selection is really important, and fair competition is the most important thing I see. As I said, I'm from San Francisco, and there are now 82 dispensaries in San Francisco with a population of 875,000 people at night. There are 82 dispensaries, and they're all doing fairly well, if not very well. In fact, the store that was right down the street from my proposed store in one day did $58,000 in sales with a street fair out in front. Right now we have deliveries coming into Sonoma from all the various cities around us, so we're losing that tax base. So what is that tax base? state of Colorado since 2014 has done $10 billion in cannabis sales, and this year netted $387,000 tax money in 572 dispensaries in the state of Colorado. So we're losing that. And I can tell you from doing the research on my proposed dispensary that the first year a dispensary will do between $2 and $4 million, of which 4% approximate is cannabis tax. So if you have one dispensary, the people that are looking for all that selection are not going to get it, because one store confined to approximately 2,000 square feet is never going to be able to handle all of the various products. And like in the wine business, there are 200 clones of Pinot Noir. In the cannabis industry, there are over 1,000 different clones of flower.
Thank you, Mr. Hennessy. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Good evening, Mayor Agramonte, Vice Mayor Ding, City Council members, and city staff. I am Perry Ellis Paniawa. I live at 1140 Beasley Way, Sonoma. My husband of 46 years and I have lived at this address for 30 years. We have raised our 3 kids here. They attended St. Francis Solano Grammar School and then went on to Justin Siena High School in Napa. They are now 39, 38, and 35. All of them are outstanding people with professional occupations. My husband and I like to contribute it to our good parenting skills. How about that? All of them, the oldest lives in LA, a short flight away. Currently our 2 married kids and spouses have settled in Napa due to the lack of affordability in Sonoma. We are now proud grandparents to 3 boys, 3 and under. I thought it would never happen. I am 75 years old, and guess what? I'm an advocate for medical cannabis and support the use of cannabis. I have family and friends who use cannabis products for varying medical conditions. My husband has chronic knee pain, probably due to his football playing and soccer playing most of his life. At the onset of the pandemic, he had a medical emergency, and I had to call 911. After 5 hospital stays and 3 surgeries, he is now considered a cancer survivor. I hate to see him have to drive all the way up to Santa Rosa to purchase his cannabis products. Let's see, so this ordinary sister, mother, wife, and grandmother urges you to find in your hearts to proceed with the second dispensary agreed upon in April. No other business has ever been subjected to what we have here, a waiting period of a year to see how a first dispensary fares. We have a well-crafted ordinance, and the selection process just needs to be streamlined. We have several current dispensary owners with good reputations interested and ready to join our selection process. Other towns with similar populations have successfully established safe dispensaries producing tax revenue and good paying jobs, some since 2017. Cannabis.
Thank you so much.
I would like to, we had a postcard campaign, and we have many postcards here. I would like to be able to submit them. Cannabis, compassion, and choice go hand in hand. Shop local.
Anyone else like to speak? Thank you so much. City Clerk, you have people on Zoom.
Yes, we do. We have Mike Benziger.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can, yeah, hi, this is Mike Benziger. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. My wife and I have a small farm up in Glen Ellen, and I just like to say I think it's very important for us to consider a second dispensary in the area. And we've gone over a lot of territory so far, but let me just maybe concentrate on one or two areas that I think are important, along with the tax revenues and other things. One is, I think that the town council should give consideration to dispensaries that will concentrate on education and consulting. It's one of the most important things that I've seen in the business is that most people don't really know much about cannabis. You can get the right dispensary in that can be a consultant that can help people really find the medications that they need. You have the formula for a very successful operation. The second thing is that I'm a small farmer up here in Glen Ellen, and for many years I've grown vegetables and so on and so forth for small, for other restaurants. And I can tell you that over time, you can't really make much money growing lettuce and broccoli. And so when cannabis became legal, it was something that was very exciting for us. But very quickly, things got bogged down. And it became clear that there weren't enough dispensaries for us to reach customers. So that was a problem. And that's a problem we have right here in Sonoma. There's just not enough outlets. And the second even a bigger problem is the fact that the way the laws are written, presidents to larger dispensaries that can grow their own material. And so they're vertically integrated. And so I would really implore the town council again to seek out dispensaries that will seek out themselves small growers and small farmers and be able to buy their product, tell their story, and to promote their products. Because being a small farmer is hard work. And if we can have the additional outlet and the additional ability to create revenue around cannabis and sell it locally, it's a big deal. And so I would ask the town council to, number one, to approve a dispensary that has a commitment to education, and secondly, a commitment to buying locally and promoting and advertising local small farmers. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have David Eicher.
Hi, yeah, I'm taking a break. I'm getting some feedback. Hold on a second. I'm taking a break from the STC meeting here and to speak on this. So first, a rhetorical question. Why give up a year of tax revenue and benefits by delaying the RFP process? I'm not sure what's the gain by that, but the only thing you can really tell is if there is parking and traffic issues, but then it's kind of too late if you wait a year and say, oh, we should have started the process for second dispensary a year ago. So also I watched the video of the last meeting about the second dispensary, and it seems like only the Spark representative was the person asking for a delay. So forgive me, this is already answered. Like I said, I've been watching, participating in the STC Zoom meeting here. But why is staff now recommending a delay when it wasn't before? So anyway, thanks very much. And that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Eicher.
Madam Mayor, no one else appears to be raising their hand.
All right, thank you so much. So I'll close public comment. We're bringing it back to staff. Did you hear anything that you need to answer from the public at this point? I don't think so. Just want to make sure. And then also council discussion for input and further direction.
May I ask a question? David, some of the public commenters have been talking about tax revenue, and I wasn't on the city council when HDL did that whole process analyzing it, but was there any sort of discussion in that analysis about potential tax revenue from 1 versus 2? Because I'm just, in my head, I'm thinking if there's, well, first of all, what's the trade area, right? Is it Sonoma Valley? And so if there's X demand for cannabis in Sonoma Valley, I could see where another dispensary might marginally increase tax revenue, but would it double it? Would it, if there's demand that all goes to one dispensary versus 2, I could see where their sales would be split, but the Sonoma would get a similar amount of tax revenue. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't recall any discussion from HDL or the council in that matter. We were given a range of what to expect from the one based on their history. And when I say their, HDL's history with working all across the state. And in talking with Spark, the first year is always kind of questionable, but it starts to ramp up after that. And I think we were expecting somewhere around $200,000 to $300,000 a year in taxes once they're fully going there, and it might take a year or two to get to that point.
And so do you have any estimate on if there were 2, would that be 350, 400, 600? I mean, we don't know.
We don't know, but I think they said a fair number is 300,000 per each site. But they didn't say if it was 1 or 2.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Right. And then I also had another question about delivery services. A commenter said that there are 3 licensed, but perhaps there are 12 that deliver. If a resident of Sonoma orders cannabis from a delivery service that is based outside the valley, does the sales tax come to us?
I don't believe it does,
It
no.
does not.
And the other thing too is they're on their own as far as reporting to us that they are actually doing business in our city, and we don't know how many come.
And there's no way for it to come to us? I mean, that's just illegal, or?
I have no idea. I'd have to defer
Okay.
to maybe Sue on that one.
So I think the tricky thing for delivery companies has always been, for most communities, if you could find out who's delivering, and if they agree, and if they charge your tax, and if they give it to you, then you can collect it. Otherwise, you've got this problem of enforcement and just figuring out who's delivering. That's the problem with every community.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And also, basically the buyer, technically, they needed to report. If they didn't pay the sales tax, and then they should pay use tax. That is on the tax return. So, but right now, it's very, very small percentage of people will report or pay the use tax on your tax return. So that enforcement, is this really the benefit to us? That's a really, really big question. Yeah. My understanding is almost none.
I have a question, Madam Mayor, if I may. Is there anything in the process that you've outlined that would prohibit the council, after we go through the RFP process, and let's say, and concurrently, Spark is operating, and we get some issues arrive. I heard transportation. I heard whatever the issue may be. Is there anything in that process where we could say, we need to take a break here and address this current issue, and then come back to it? The reason I'm asking is the process itself is very long, and assuming you wait the 6 months, does the 6 months mean it's just 6 months, or does it mean 6 months and then there's an analysis? What does that mean? I would imagine that all along there will be a consistent analysis of how they're doing. And by the way, I wish them nothing but the best. I think I'm very grateful that they're operating and, and so forth. But should there be something that goes wrong, it seems like, is there a way we could do a course correction, at that time? Because it's I started adding up all the 30s and I got past, 270 days. And I figured, well, there's time in there. Maybe there's time to make some course corrections as well. I mean, is that possible?
So, yeah, I'll try. I think I heard 3 questions in there.
Did you? Okay.
Maybe there were more.
Sorry.
No, it's not a problem. My first reaction would be, it would depend on the course correction that's needed. Have they violated a conditional use permit condition of approval? That will be something that we could then refer back to the Planning Commission, have that discussion. The CCBP is renewable each year, so we do have that mechanism. That was in the process, but it's in the administrative regulations that we provided for you in your packet. So
Well,
yes, that check-in is there. They have to renew the CCBP every year.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I think I was going a little bit in a different direction. It was more like looking at the revenues, looking at the community benefits, and all of the things that the 6 months is ostensibly to look at. Let's say you wait 6 months and you say, okay, let's start the RFP process, and then then we find out like the revenues aren't that high or whatever. Is there an ability for the council to make a course correction at that time to say, we'd like to put this process on hold because we'd like to make sure that our initial approval gets everything going before we start, instead of waiting 6 months, which may not yield us any information whatsoever, have all these 30-day things go on, and, we don't have any ability to really be flexible in there. Because what I'm getting at is I hear both sides. I mean, I want Spark to be very successful. I also understand, that there are other, people out there, wanting to get in line to be in this business, and I have nothing against that at all. I've said that many times. But I also believe that, this is a new thing for the city, and it's sensible to ask the questions. But I want to know, is there any way we can kind of do this concurrently? Because it seems like a very long period of time where we could do several things at once. And maybe I'm not expressing it clearly enough, but, I'd like to sort of do both things. I'd like to see Spark get their chance to do and prove themselves and so forth, and at the same time allow people to get in line while we're doing the analysis of the success of the first operation.
I guess.
And if you can explain it, my ideas better, I welcome you to do so.
Well, I guess my only question about, because I think I understood what you're saying, but doesn't each applicant have to pay like $12,000 or something, like at the beginning of the process? And so they probably will expect the process to.
I see. $12,000 does change one's mind, yes.
So maybe if I can just chime in on a couple comments. So yeah, it's tricky in your process because it's true you paid $12,000 and that's the start in the process and it's non-refundable. Right. So theoretically they could go through the process, and then what you're saying is there a checkpoint where we don't want to issue a conditional the conditional certificate?
Correct.
In which case you can do that, but they paid $12,000 to get to that point. Mm-hmm. And depends when you do it. And then you have this issue, let's say you get past that checkpoint, and then they go through the planning commission process to get a use permit. And then the council says, put that on hold, but they've also gotten that point where you can almost argue if they have a use permit, are they entitled? And then you have this extra step where they have to get the conditional, I forget what it's called, CC, the business permit. So you have another step. And where within all that steps can you actually stop and they're not considered, they're entitled, they probably spent how much money to find a site to get the use permit and get to that final process. So I think it's a little tricky as you go through that process. And then the one thing I wanted to point out is For staff, the 6-month review was really to evaluate the community-wide impacts and the benefits, more so than the financial side. We just went traffic, parking, and so on. That was that point as opposed to the financial aspect of the operation. So anyway, depending on what you do and suggest, though, I do have some questions of clarification if you get to that point regarding process.
If I could just chime in briefly, I think that like any RFP, the council is going to have the authority to reject all bids, essentially. So that would be at the conditional certificate phase. So anything up to there, that's within the council's discretion. Once you issue the conditional certificate, as Garrett was mentioning, at that point, there starts to be real interests at stake. And that they're going to lose that $12,000. That's $12,000 that goes to pay for all of the staff time, consultant time to evaluate those proposals. So that's going to be some cost at that point. But so I'd say up to that conditional certificate phase is where you have discretion, complete discretion.
And one added piece to that is that there's a period of 1 year from the issuance of the conditional certificate for them to get their CCBP. Otherwise, it expires unless they request an extension beforehand.
Some preliminary comments. First of all, I certainly would support moving ahead with these resolutions for the regulations and the procedures and guidelines, with the caveat that I would much prefer that the site selection is pushed off, such as was discussed earlier by Councilmember Barnett. The problem that I'm having is in talking about when we would issue an RFP is not so much my concern for the impacts that Spark might run into in their first few months of operation, as it is the ability of our staff to be able to support everything that we need to get done this year without having it come to a screeching halt because we have to go through an extensive RFP process and put all these other things pushed down the road. We came up with a list of council goals and priorities at our retreat in September, and there are some very significant things that we need to get done this year. And unfortunately, we are taxing our staff with a considerable burden of getting even some of these priorities done, much less moving ahead with another process which could totally wipe out some of the other things that are going on. So I'm really reserving my comment on when we would issue that RFP to address the issues that we have in front of us on many other fronts.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with Councilman Felder in large part, especially when he suggested the, eliminating the site selection. So I would like to look at the regulations and the process a little more. I don't think it's, as we earlier discussed, I don't think a site is necessary. I think that comes in the planning phase. So I do support that. In general, I think I've really been thinking about this issue quite a bit. I've talked to many people in the audience. I've talked to, many people in Sonoma, just what they think about this. And I do think that, I think Sonoma should be proud of itself. I researched, there was a Politico article from last month, I think 70% of municipalities in California do not even allow a recreational dispensary. Healdsburg doesn't allow it, Windsor doesn't allow it, Cloverdale doesn't allow it, Runner Park doesn't allow it, Napa, St. Helena, Petaluma, as someone in the audience just mentioned, American Canyon. And so, for small little Sonoma, we not only have approved and have a recreational dispensary coming, but we've already amended our ordinance to allow a second. And so I think that's actually pretty significant for a town like us. And so the question isn't if we're going to have a second dispensary, it's when. And I'm persuaded by Councilman Felder, and I do also worry about staff time and capacity. We have a state mandated housing element due in 2023 or by January that we haven't quite frankly even started, right? I mean, we keep pushing that kickoff meeting back. Councilman Felder and I are on the Development Code Subcommittee. We have a lot to do there. We have major projects coming. And in my view, our planning department over the last 2 years has devoted significant time to the expense of our general plan update, our housing element, to cannabis. I mean, this first process took a very long time, and in my view, the planning staff, and it was the priority of the city council at the time, and so that obviously you respond to the city council, and significant time was spent on cannabis as I just said, to the expense of other major issues in our town. And so I'm trying to balance, in my view, the need for a second dispensary with all of these priorities and capacity. And so when it comes to competition, I've done a lot of research on that. Like, I haven't found any data that says a town with one dispensary has higher prices than towns with multiple dispensaries. And if that exists, I would love to see it. I mean, I went on a website I'm sure everyone in this audience is familiar with, Weed Maps, and I, took one product that, and compared them, and you can search and you can look at all, and there's some towns that have one dispensary, some towns have many, and they all seem to be about the same price. I do understand selection might be an issue, and all I would say on that is that a second dispensary, in my view, there will be a second dispensary at some point outside the city limits in this valley and inside the city limits. And so I do think the selection issue will be solved at one point, and I would also encourage the public to reach out to Spark. I mean, if they don't carry something that you want, perhaps they will. I mean, I don't know. But I do think that while it's an issue, I just don't know if it is an issue where we have to, change the priorities of our planning department right now. And, as Councilman Felder said, this wasn't on our council priorities and goals for this year. It is something that I don't think we should forget about in the future. I do think when a previous council started this process, as a planning commissioner at the time, we, were sort of involved in those regulations, but even just as a resident, I watched the entire process. And former mayors Hundley and Harrington and Harvey, I believe, made the point that maybe, I think that HDL study did say that 2 dispensaries could exist in Sonoma, but they chose one because they wanted to see how it went, because it was just new for Sonoma. And I know that we don't treat any other business this way, but no other business has these kind of regulations, or like a state department. And hopefully, in a perfect world, we will get to a point where it is just any other business. But to get to that point, I think that former council wanted to show Sonoma that this isn't going to be a big deal, because I don't think it will be. And so I'm just sort of asking the question out loud, I guess, will there be irreparable harm if we decide to issue the RFP per staff recommendation? And I don't think there would be, especially when you consider how, in my view, progressive our town is compared to other municipalities in the state. And so balancing the priorities of the planning department and everything, that is sort of, I'm open to the rest of the council here, but that's where I'm coming down.
So Bob, I know that you come from the Planning Commission many, many years. Did you want to dovetail onto anything that Councilmember Barnett said?
I'll hold comment for a little bit and see where the rest of the council's at.
Thank you, Mayor Agramonte. we spend too much time on this issue. And of course, the money is important, the tax money is important, but it's not as significant. And I figure out, what do we spend the money on this topic from beginning to right now? Already in the triple, already in the, and 4 times for the next 4 or 5 years. And you can bring in the tax and the income. And it's not the money issue. Basically, it's kind of the message the city council we want to send over to our community. So far, I think our city council take it very seriously to take a very responsibility for our local communities and different opinions, different backgrounds. Some is based on the personal experience, some based on the financial interest. We consider it all, and also we are thinking. So we are proud. We can consider all, especially for those council members right now retired, just only Mayor Agramonte closely involved ordinance preparation. That is a big work. This kind of documents could be as, the model copy for another city. However, the city of the Sonoma is different. We have our way to process any project, especially this new project. We already spent a lot of the energy and the time on this. We had better do it better and try to be perfect, although it is not necessary. So according to the staff, and suggest 6 months for the reviewing and the afternoon, the processing, got the information that is necessary. That is take responsibility for the business owners, for the customers, for our neighbors, for the communities. I'm the tax person, specialized in the tax consulting. I do have some marijuana the business clients, to be honest. My understanding, it's tough, especially for these kind of small players, and mom, pop, and have 10 acres, the land, and want to plant it and then sell it to earn the money. It's impossible. But we in the city council, we want to protect our local people, right? So that we cannot just leave it open, come here and then you can apply. Finally, our local people cannot get a benefit. Why you select us to be as a leader? No, we need to protect. Number one. Number two, still is a compliance issue. And under the federal level, still it is illegal. People are struggling. How to avoid pay additional taxes, let the store come down. A lot of the people that owing the taxes and bankrupt, and also got a lot of the issues. So when we move forward any project, of course we need to look at the positive side, bright future, but never forget people already they got into trouble. We should learn something. That is a little bit of contribute to our meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I appreciate all of the comments that were expressed and the staff, and I thank you for all the work and that has gone on this. I mean, I was asked early on this year if I supported a second cannabis dispensary, and I said yes. I didn't have any sort of reason why not. It's like, it's a business, it's a legal business. I have a great interest in making sure that we make a lot of tax money in the city of Sonoma so we can do good things. And my impression is that these businesses will garnish some tax money. So I'm in support. I also, just in a global sense, like, the article that you brought up from Politico, it's a sad statement, really, because it's really stating that the state of California municipalities would rather see illegal operations persist rather than make ordinances to do the right thing. And the illegal operations, a lot of them are very detrimental to the environment and, produce materials that, don't have the quality that Spark provides. And so I agree with your sentiment, Councilmember Barnett, that we're doing the right thing by opening this dispensary. The timing is concerning to me because as I look at the timeline, as I said, I'm adding up all the 30s, and that's why I asked my question, was there any way we could sort of dovetail it? But I understand that even though they have to submit the $12,000, we still have the ability to say no at any given time if we decide to reject the applications and none of them work. So I feel a little bit comfortable about that because there always should be an escape clause. We shouldn't be committed to something that we all of a sudden decide is not in the best interest. But that being said, I do support a second dispensary. I think that the town can support it. The timeline, it seems to me I'm learning a lot more about, today is my first day on the job, and I learn a lot of things. So I hope that 6 months, because I'm hearing a consensus here, is a 6 months where we can be very proactive and that we don't use that as an impediment to stop, changing the society of California to a regulated, healthy cannabis industry and away from an unregulated cannabis industry that is doing bad things to our environment and not allowing us to collect the taxes. Because the bottom line for me is I would like to collect those taxes. So I hope that eventually we'll have 2 dispensaries and that they will make a lot of money and that we will be able to do wonderful things for the people of Sonoma. But I feel the consensus on the council that the time limit is appropriate. So thank you.
I guess I just kind of reinforce what I said earlier, that it's not that I am opposed to a second dispensary by any means, but the timeline is as to when that might be accomplished does impact a significant number of other things that need to be done in the city, things that are going to affect the quality of life for everybody in Sonoma, because the state is mandating a lot of things that we have to address and work out to preserve what we have as a quality of life here in Sonoma. And if we don't get to those things and the time moves on and we haven't gotten ordinances and things on the books, we can be overwhelmed by the events that take place outside of our control. So that's why I am suggesting that we take the recommendation of staff to hold off on this RFP for a while so we can clear some of these other things up that we have to address.
Thank you. Well, I think everybody's been very patient with me. I agree about the 6 months, and there are some things that have been sitting around for years, and unfortunately, it's not our city manager that caused this. It seems to be a culture that sort of rolls things that take a long, long time. And I know you are very committed to the issues of cemeteries. We have no more space.
Yeah, no, I know.
I mean, literally no more space for people who have lived here for generations, no more space to be able to bury them. There are other issues that are just as, right up there, just as important. I think the housing element, all of those things that you have said, these are important things. These are things that we were required to do. I think, first of all, because of circumstances, I helped to put in the first dispensary, but I have said now, historically, I do not support a second dispensary for not for any of these reasons that you're mentioning, but I think you can feel that there is a majority for people who support a second dispensary. That's how I feel. I can't assume that, but I do agree with what we're talking about, delay of the 6 months. Thank you. So, how do we move forward now, Mr. City Manager?
So I think it sounds like for the application and the regulations, it sounds like the council or majority of the council, you're indicating you no longer would like site selection to be part of phase 2, where before my understanding was that was a factor in the decision-making process. So if it isn't, because that's going to go then to the planning commission when they go for their use permit, then it sounds like under our process, well, we can't put that back on the screen, but under our process we have in phase 1, theoretically we narrow it down to 5, and then it went into phase 2. So now would be phase 2, once we did a short list of 5, assuming you had more than 5, then the suggestion would be then they would just be asked to make a presentation to the council regarding their proposals, and then you would pick one, assuming you only wanted one more. Is that the thought pattern for the council?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that, I think, does that make work for you?
If I can just remind folks, the reason for the business competition site before you get to the site selection was to get down to 5 finalists, and then they would go on their merry way to go find a site. Then the council wanted to interview the top 5 in the last competition process. They narrowed it down to 2 who had sites, and then they picked from those 2. So that was the whole point of the phase 2, but clearly we could nuke phase 2 and just put what I'm thinking here, we'd have to make some changes in the resolutions that we've done, but if we get your general direction, we could do that. But put the conditional certificate as a step 4 in phase 1, and then they can go on to an unadulterated phase 2, or excuse me, bullet number 2, not a phase 2, unless Garrett has some other thoughts.
And that would sort of speed it up, right? Yeah.
So you'd be getting the conditional certificate without a site. And
Correct.
then obviously the entitlements would come next, as well as to the extent the operator was leasing the facility, this requirement for the lease agreement would come at the latter stage prior to issuance of a commercial cannabis business
Yeah,
permit.
I think it would give more bargaining power to the business that we selected. And I also think that would just be a sort of standard course of action. It would just go to the planning commission, and then they would evaluate it with, compatibility of the neighborhood, et cetera, like they would typically would do any other business. So.
Do you feel that you've gotten direction?
So I think if that's the council's direction, then the resolution actually says, if you just adopt the resolution, actually it says the council is approving administrative regulations, application procedure, and guidelines as attached, and the city manager is authorized to make final edits and changes to follow the council's direction, and or for additional clarity or thoroughness. So with your council direction, if you adopt the resolution, you've given us that direction, so we'd have the flexibility to modify this whole process without having to come back to you. And for the RFP, you really don't need to take any action other than we know as staff to come back to you in 6 months after Spark has opened to provide some analysis and direction from you to issue the RFP at that time. Is that?
Or are you suggesting we move on the resolution but with amendments?
No, I think the resolution, the city attorney correct me, but I believe that portion of the resolution gives us authority to modify it
Oh, all right.
per your direction that you've just.
So at this point, I'm looking for a motion for this.
Yes, a motion on the
Okay,
resolutions,
So I'm
yes.
looking for a motion for this resolution. I have it right here, Council.
All right, I move that we adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma establishing and adopting fees to process proposals for the commercial cannabis retail businesses in our
Thank
city.
you, and could I have a second?
I second.
Thank
I
you.
second.
And roll call, please.
All right, as a little clarification on the recommendation, you have 2 resolutions, so were you planning to make a motion to adopt both resolutions?
If you look at the
At the
staff
recommended
report, there's a
council
recommended-
action?
Yeah, well, yes, I will.
Yeah, so So anyway, your motion would have been adopt a resolution approving administrative regulations,
Yeah, I can't
application
find it.
procedures, and guidelines.
Yes.
And the second, and then you would also be adopting a resolution approving commercial cannabis processing fees. Well, I believe that was going to be your motion.
Yes. So moved.
Yeah, whatever you said. Thank you. So, okay, that was a motion, and I have a second. Jack? We're second? And may I have a roll call, please? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Toy.
Vice Mayor Ding,
Aye.
Councilmember Burnett,
Aye.
Councilmember Felder,
Aye.
Councilmember Lowe, Mayor Agramonte.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Well, it looks like we have, what else?
7.3.
No, something. So, 7.3, discuss, consider, and possibly take action to adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with AECOM to prepare appropriate environmental review pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act.
It will
City-
be your associate planner.
Oh, all right. I'm turning to so, all right. Thank you,
Hi.
Ms. Kearney.
Thank you.
Tierney.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
We're back before the council following our last meeting with direction to move forward and a contract with AECOM. After the last meeting, Director Storer and myself reached out to numerous other consulting firms to make sure that we knew what our options were for moving forward in order to have as unbiased of a process as possible. There were several firms that we contacted that were not interested, and as a result, we have brought forward 2 additional proposals. These are responding to the same RFP. This would be the RFP 2 that both are responding to, and staff's recommendation is to move forward with the contract with AECOM. Both firms and proposals were very similar, and the AECOM proposal was a little bit cheaper, and the timeline was a little bit faster. Other questions?
So let's. I'm kind of lost here right now. Staff responds to any. Any public.
I cleared the room. Look at that.
God. Any comments from the public? Not seeing none. I think someone's coming back for a jacket. And is there anyone online? What happened? We even lost our city clerk. What happened to our city clerk? She's on the floor. Oh, is there anyone online? Oh, great. Okay.
But they haven't raised their hand. They're not speaking. They don't want to ask.
They don't want to. Oh, all righty. Okay, thank you. So let's see. I'm looking through my. Okay. So my little directions here. Are there any questions for the council? From the council for staff?
Yeah.
Nothing. Yes, Jack.
I do have question.
Oh, yeah, sure.
The 2 companies.
Well, I'm sorry. I have to close the public comments. Go ahead, Jack. I'm sorry.
So I look at the 2 companies, and both company, I feel very comfortable, and more confident for the AECOM. But I still have some other questions. First of all, and then the drainage and the condition. Although then they mentioned about and then the drainage, but this is a hillside and projects produces a lot of the rain and then overflow and then the collection construction and the water retention and then they put together and the 4th Street East and the Brazil, and then all the way down come to the 4th Street East all the way down to the Lavo. So I'm wondering, after this project will generate more water retention, so probably developer should work with the city, see if we can improve that area.
Yeah,
So that especially during the, this is my concern for the drainage. And the second one is for the groundwater. I'm not sure if they have the well or without a well. Three in the parcels, do they have the well?
So both of the project, there's 3 lots, they would all be hooked up to city sewer. And as part of the process, we would be getting revised applications with project-specific details, including full stormwater analysis, and that will be under the scope of the full EIR, and that would be the same for both consultants.
Okay. Yeah, because they are in the city, they can use on the city service, water service. But the one thing, just to remind developer, and we have approved for the Sonoma Valley in the groundwater sustainability plan. We just starting from the next year, we should carry it out. Ask the consulting company to look at it, try to be compliant.
Yeah, that's a great comment. The groundwater is one of the required CEQA areas that
Yes.
will be analyzed.
Yeah, because I saw that this company already mentioned, AECOM already mentioned the groundwater. Just let them know recently we have the new local code has been issued. And the number 3 is the wide fire dispensable, area. That is also important. But in AECOM, this company didn't mention. However, another company they mentioned about this. So this is also important. That area, it's easily to get the fire. So they should look at it. State and CAL file, wildfire, and the code for sure to be compliant, because they have the 2 different zones, some 0 to 5 feet and 30 feet and 100 feet.
Yes, yeah. So the project site is located in the local area of responsibility, so it's not in the CAL FIRE area of responsibility, and that's where a lot of those regulations kick in. But again, that is a required CEQA section, the wildland fire impacts, and that will be analyzed.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Another concern is the access, the driveway to the top of the parcels. Yeah, should we look at them? It is in a street. It is a steep, very steep. Be sure also it should be compliant with the the local and the code.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that is the hillside code. Our city have this right. Yeah, or if the measurement show you is not compliant, maybe they should find an alternative one or something like that.
Yeah, through the land use process, we'll be looking at full compliance with the code and all sections of the code.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that is all my concerns. Thank you.
Just to check on that one, there is some regulation on the hillside on cut and fill, how much is permitted, correct? So that would be part of the environmental impact that would be looked at.
Yeah, so the compliance with our zoning code with the hillside ordinance, that would be in land use, and compliance with the policies, the actual cut and fill and impacts associated with moving the earth, that would be in a different section.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Barnett? Oh, do you have?
No, I have no comment, no.
So, direction from Mr. Toy. I think we've had our discussion here. I see a resolution, but I'm looking at comments about a contract. Is that what we're?
The resolution authorizes him to execute.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, so I'm looking for a motion, a resolution.
Any in the public?
I think we did it.
Oh, we did.
I was actually ahead of my game.
I move. Yeah, I move. Oh, sorry.
Mr. City Attorney, do we need to read the resolution?
There is a recommended council action, if you want to read that. Adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with AECOM to prepare the appropriate environmental review pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act for the 4th Street East and Brazil Street Hillside Residential Project.
So you have offered us the shorter version.
So you would say
Yeah.
Thank
so
you.
moved.
So moved.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I moved, just copy.
Just
our
what he
city,
said,
yes.
yes.
Uh-huh.
And a second, please?
I'll second that.
May I have a roll call?
Vice Mayor Ding,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnett,
Aye.
Councilmember Felder,
Aye.
Councilmember Lowe,
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Let's see. So before we go on to council members' reports, I want to remind everybody of the dedications we've done. I had a dedication for Leonard F. Duggan Jr. and also Joaquin Clarencio Reyes, 17, of Sonoma, tragically passed away.
And also Rachel Cicchetti and Eric Paget.
Thank you so much.
Andy
So,
Harry in the,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Andy Harry in the jury.
So I just wanted to remind you that have dedications. I don't know if you've learned this,
Everybody.
but we need.
So beautiful.
I know, I saw that, but I need to remind you. You need to give addresses for people so our city clerk can do the letter.
Okay.
So whenever you do a dedication, you just have to add that. Well, thank you. On to 7.1 committee reports. Anyone reporting? Yes, there. Thank you.
I attended a Sonoma Clean Power board meeting on the 4th of November. And a couple of things that came out of that. First of all, Sonoma Clean Power is providing a very valuable service and being an advocate for the ratepayers of this county. They were able to get a settlement agreement with anytime there are sanctions against PG&E, they have been putting those on the burden of the ratepayers as opposed to the shareholders. So they now have to charge those sanctions, anything that they are sanctioned for, to shareholders instead of the ratepayers. So they're saving us some money.
That sounds wonderful. Thank
The
you.
other thing, and something that I would encourage anybody that has some time to get involved with, is Sonoma Clean Power has an advanced energy center up in Santa Rosa that they've opened right in downtown. And it's an amazing complex. You can go on a 30-minute guided tour and learn about all these newest energy-saving technologies, incentives, financing options, and ways to produce clean power that doesn't impact the environment. So it certainly is a worthwhile thing, and I would encourage people to support that. And I would also recommend that at some future time we might invite Sonoma Clean Power to give us a presentation for
That would
all
be
the good
great.
things they're doing.
Yeah, they haven't been here in a while, I think.
They're good.
So, Jack? Oh,
Yes, I have the one to share. Actually, not related to our committee, but I think it's good to share with everybody. And this morning, and I, as the representative of the California state enrolled agent, and total we have the 4 people meet with the Michael Thompson in Washington D.C. Actually, we should visit in person, but during pandemic, we just stay here. We discussed about RS reforms and how to fix broken system, how to use the $10 million for the RS. Yeah, so that is very, very effective in the meeting. I appreciate it. Council member can listen on the tax professionals' opinions and the suggestions. Thank you.
thank you, Vice Mayor, and also Mr.
I
Barnett.
don't have anything else.
Sandra, would you like to share? I've given
Yeah.
Sandra our work plan.
Yeah, no, I've got the work plan. I wanted to just share, I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but this is Native American History Month. And so I would just like to, and I saw the article in the paper, and I would just like to, there's a thing that the Native American History Month proponents like organizations to do, and that is to acknowledge the land that they're on. And so I would just like to take this moment to acknowledge that we gather today on the traditional land of the Grayton Rancheria and the Coast Miwok peoples, past and present, and to honor them with gratitude and to remind ourselves to commit how to be best stewards of the land we inhabit. So I just would like to share that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. No one else, I think. So, thank you so much, Sandra. Our city manager?
Oh, real quick, one is I hope you notice all the artwork, so thanks to the city clerk for getting that installed.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Thank you to Bonnie Durant. She also did photographs for the hospital and here as well. And then, of course, managed and overseen by our Rebecca Barr, our city clerk. No easy task, I'll tell you. But they're beautiful pictures, so we have to encourage people before they come in to walk around and look at they didn't even notice when they were sitting there.
They did. People noticed.
Some of them
They did.
but I had to go up and tell them, look on the wall.
Yeah. Next time you put an agenda, visit.
Right, visit the wall when they,
Visit the wall.
a little sign, visit the wall. And
Yeah.
our city attorney.
Oh, can I add one more thing? So I just want to report at your December 1st meeting, we actually did invite the county to come and make a presentation on the Sonoma Development Center plan. At that time, the thought pattern was they make a brief presentation, council can ask a few questions, and then we'll have an item so that maybe not, well, we'll have something so the council could provide direction on whether or not you wanted to have a future study session, how you wanted to do that, and whether you wanted to, take a position or offer suggestions to the county. So that will be scheduled for December 1st to receive the presentation from the county and get some direction to the council how you want to proceed.
Right, thank you.
That's
And
great.
I would like to thank Councilmember Barnett and Lowe for discussing the district issue and getting that out on the 11th hour. I really appreciate it. You know what, the last person that actually was the meeting.